just hoping that it's not too late to keep her, because I think that the loss is going to be for our children in this community. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Hello, hi. My name is Joe Daly. I'm going to echo some of the same sentiments you just heard. I have 2 students in the district. I'll try and keep it short. I also was unaware that maybe this is a done deal at this point, but I figured I may as well take the time to make my voice heard. I've had serious disagreements with some of the decisions that Superintendent Savastano has made for this district. My own family has been involved in the issue of personal data being released, and yet I still stand by her. I really think that Superintendent Savastano is the best we can get in this district. I'm supremely amazed by her. Even when we disagree, she's open to hearing me. She's open to hearing concerns. Even when we're on opposite sides of things, she takes the time to listen. With my own children, I think that I try and teach them, when you make a mistake, you learn from it, you hold yourself accountable for it. I think this is an opportunity to take a mistake, hold the person accountable for it, but move on. If the concern was the release of personal information, that's done. No new superintendent coming in will change that. But I have a feeling that if Superintendent Savastano was to remain with us in this district, she would not make that mistake again. If there's other things at play, that's another issue, but I've been so impressed by her putting the children first, putting the families first. To me, that's the most important role of our superintendent. Disagree or not with her policies or decisions or where she wants to guide our district, she has been there to listen to us. I believe she's respectful. I believe she will take accountability for her actions and her leadership in this district. And throughout this entire pandemic, she has been put under lots of pressure that any of us, I think, would probably crumble under. She's put in countless hours, and I know she's there late working. She does need to be accountable for what has happened, but I think it's a major loss for our district if we let her go. If there's anything that can be done to keep her, I urge you please to reconsider and think about moving forward with some stability in our district for all of the leadership that we've lost. Let's keep someone good, let's hold them accountable, and let's move forward and try and do better next time around. That's the message that we teach to our students in this district. That's the message that we as parents teach to our children. And I think that the people who care about them and lead them, like Superintendent Savastano, deserve that as well. Thank you for listening and considering my point of view. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nick LaFleur, Dean of Students at Kingstown. I'm also the Vice President of NEASK. I just wanted to speak and kind of summarize. I think that the decision that you guys have made is a decision that you felt you needed to make. And I think we've heard an outcry from the first 2 speakers. We've heard from a lot of teachers. And I think that just to kind of separate things into different lenses, you have a job to do. You're in those seats, and as a community, we're going to do our best to be supportive. I think what's loud and clear is that what we're hearing is teaching and learning, the education bucket, is really going to suffer from this decision. You have administrative and, excuse me, you've got a lot of lenses that you have to look at this through. But I think what we're hearing is that educationally, teaching and learning is a huge, huge loss for our district. But just to kind of summarize what's been going on the last couple of weeks, hopefully we're able to bounce back and unify to move in the right direction. But I think it's tough. But you've made your decisions, and hopefully those other pieces justify what a loss this is. Speaking of education, I also want to take a moment to congratulate Angela Christina, becoming the assistant principal at the high school. It's well deserved. And in her, we have another strong leader that's going to make this district a lot stronger. So congratulations to Angela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kingston, Rhode Island. I am not a teacher, so I'd like to caveat that there. But I do have 2 children.
Sean, can you just talk to us
Sorry,
about, because last time we need you to look at us and talk to us.
Okay, but I never, so just to be fair here, I never actually said anything about a particular person like some on this board have done. So let's be clear, when I talk to teachers as a whole, it's a group of teachers hearing from a parent. I wish we did have an open dialogue if we're going to go on that path, because to me, the only way that this town can cure some of the issues that they have at hand is to not have it be a situation where you come here speak for 3 minutes, say thank you, and go away. I think the reality is we need to actually have open dialogue. That's how you solve things in a town like this right now. It's a back and forth conversation where if someone's unhappy with you, that's okay. You don't have to be friends, you don't have to be colleagues, but you have to come up with a reasonable way to respect each other. That being said, what I'm here to do is actually thank you guys for getting, or I assume for getting rid of Ms. Apostolano tonight, because I do think that sometimes, like I said last time, mistakes cause someone to have to be fired. In this case, giving away children's data is a fireable offense. Unfortunately, it may or may not have an impact on the schools, but what I would say is that I think we may be overstating a superintendent's job duty here. Because if I'm thinking of this as just from a generalized perspective, even as a teacher's perspective, the teachers have an impact on the students. The principal has an impact on the teachers. The superintendent has an impact on the principals. There's a level-setting measure here. So I think we actually should be addressing the impact that the principals have made in each one of these, locations, and the impact that the teachers have made in each one of these locations to be successful teaching the students. If the concern here coming from the teachers and the union, or whatever it is behind us, is that they feel as though they don't get the support from prior superintendents, the school committee's job, whoever's interviewing new superintendent's job, is to ensure that they are going to get a supportive leader that allows them a seat at the table. That's what I'm hearing. The concern is that they're not getting a seat at the table. The concern is that they're going to lose a seat at the table. Really what we need to do is hire someone that brings them to the table to make the right decisions for the students. I'd also like to say, though, this isn't the only town or the only district that successfully went through COVID. So did Narragansett, North Kingstown, so did the private schools like Monsignor Clark, so did Kingston Hill Academy, Compass School, East Greenwich. There's a lot of schools that successfully made it through COVID. So I do like to give respect to, we aren't the only district that's done this. We're not the only districts that's done this successfully. And there's principals out there at some of these other schools that could be superintendents that are very inclusive. To be transparent here, but maybe you guys will look at it, maybe you won't. But I do think that that's really what we need to do moving forward, figure out a way to communicate as a community, be successful with one another, have open dialogue and open discussion to resolve the issues in this town. Because one of the big things we heard last week from many people speaking was that this has happened in the past, it's going to happen again, it happened 20 years ago. That's a problem. It can't consistently be, well, it happened before, so it's going to happen again and it's going to happen over and over. We need to create change. How do you create change? We work together to actually create an environment where change is plausible. That's all I ask you guys to do. Pick the right superintendent to help the teachers create change while creating a community involvement and actually keeping everything at the table. Keeping it in a room, or having open meetings, having meetings at job, or whatever it may be. Make it so the community does feel involved, so it doesn't go to social media. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nobody else in this room that would like to make a comment, I'm going to move over into the virtual. I do have somebody over there.
Can you do it, Fred? Diane?
Diane? Diane, you have your hand raised, and if you would like to speak, you can go ahead. It looks like you muted yourself. With that, I'm going to close community comments. We will then move on to school committee business. Tonight, item A is discussion and action to hire a temporary employee to assist with the opera request.
I'd like to make a motion to approve hiring temporary employee to assist with the APRA responses.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion?
The only thing that I will say is I would like to kind of say publicly, and if you don't mind me saying it on behalf of our school committee, a big humongous thank you to Jenna Willett for the, I can't even imagine how many hours she's put into dealing with the current APRA responses and continues to. And so having someone to assist her will be, it just, there are kind of no words at this point as to how helpful that will be. So that's really all I have to say, and I hope you pass it.
In the spirit of being grateful, I also want to thank our lawyers as well for helping with that process, and I definitely think we need someone to help support them.
With that said, I think we should make a vote. Ms. Boyd?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Fish?
Aye.
And Paula? Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Oh, Michelle. Michelle.
I'm here.
That motion passes. Next on the agenda is discussion and action with the superintendent's agreement, separation agreement, and
So I would
do I
like
have
to
a
make,
motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the superintendent's separation agreement.
Second.
So made the motion. Kate McNulty second that. And now we will take a vote. Ms. Boyd?
Aye.
Ms. McNulty?
Aye.
Ms. Fish?
Aye.
Ms. Busso?
Aye.
Ms. Whitford? Aye. Tonight, the superintendent and the school committee have agreed to a separation agreement, whereby the superintendent has tendered her resignation effectively immediately. And the committee has accepted this resignation. The committee will work to secure new leadership in the near future to move our important mission forward. In an effort to ensure transparency, the separation agreement will be posted on board docs after the meeting. Per the school committee's policies, and any questions on this matter, please be directed to the chair and SKSD Legal. Thank you. Next on the agenda is discussion and action and interim superintendent. So,
Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge, I know there are people here that are filled with a lot of disappointment, and I think as a school committee, we can say we have heard everything you've said, we've read all the emails that you have sent, and we have taken all of them to heart and are keeping them close to us when we, begin a search. But I do think it's important for us to acknowledge that to the teachers and how they're feeling, and we realize that it's going to take time to move forward, but we want you to move forward with us in a partnership, and I just think that's important before we continue the discussion, so thank you.
I'll make a motion to move forward with an the discussion. I'm not sure how to word this one.
I think that at this point, it's simply discussion, so it's probably okay for you to just discuss.
I'll make a motion to start the discussion around finding an interim superintendent.
And you don't even have to make a motion. I think you can just discuss it.
any discussion? Anybody?
So one of the things that this interim superintendent is going to be extremely important to help us guide through the superintendent search. Having just gone through it not too long ago, it's extremely important for us all to come together to find basically the superintendent that we are looking for. So the pendulum was over here, the pendulum has swung here, we need to come into the middle. And while we did have an outpouring of support for the current superintendent in public meetings, there was a faction who were not comfortable coming to public meetings that we did hear from through private emails, through conversation, and we want to make sure they're heard too. So when we go through the process of finding the new permanent superintendent, we need an interim who's going to help guide us to get to that point so that we can bring both groups together so that years past, people who are speaking out now did not feel comfortable speaking out. Now, there's a group who do not feel comfortable speaking out. What we want is to get to a place where everyone feels comfortable speaking out and everyone, like, no one is afraid to speak. So we are going to need somebody with experience, with confidence, with a level head that multiple groups can relate to. The question then comes in, how do you find that person for the interim? I'm looking at you, Aubrey, because I do look for kind of some legal guidance on how to get there. And also, as far as, it's not on our agenda tonight, so as far as our current leadership structure and who can kind of fill that void for days or however it is in order to get an interim brought in.
Sure. So I think that in this, very short amount of time that you have to kind of put someone in the interim position, districts usually, if they're happy with people internally, will look internally to see if there's anyone who has a superintendent cert who may be able to step into the interim role, who would be willing to step into that role. I do think that the chair has had some discussions this week around that she might want to share. Also, looking to retired or former superintendents who may be willing to step in the role, those would be the usual places that school committees would look for an interim.
So, I would like to share that I did have a conversation this week with a potential intern to help guide us move forward until we can get that permanent superintendent. So I had the conversation with Gina Marcello, who was happy to step in at this time and continue to do the work that she's been doing alongside of our former superintendent to keep us on the path to moving forward. And so Gina will be stepping into that role. Hopefully very soon. But Christy?
So my question is, are we considering Gina as of right now before we find an interim, or would she, you're not saying she would act as the interim indefinitely?
No, she was asked to step in while we find.
Just to add some information to the table, I am very grateful that you've had some of this conversation, and I know that we are fortunate in the district to have, I believe, several folks who have some of those qualifications who can be supportive, and I'm grateful to know that some are willing to step in this moment. I think that's really important to find that balance and that continuity that folks are saying that we need. So I would be supportive of that. I would also like us to talk about and begin what the formal process is for an interim. My hopes is that we can, as Kate was saying, move forward with some fresh perspective and be able to have a neutral body that we can move forward together, parents, teachers, this board, to be able to move that vision that we have come around as a community forward, but to do that with leadership that we can all feel comfortable with and be a part of the process of selecting that in the future.
And so, Ms. Lombardo, can you, like, just kind of, for our sake and also for the informational purposes for the community, can you give us like a guideline as to, okay, the first thing you would do, you know, you should do this, this, this. You know, I understand that, you know, Ms. Masiello has agreed to hold the reins for a short space of time while we find a more permanent interim who will then help us find a permanent superintendent. But so I think that process of finding an interim superintendent, you know, I understand that we can look to retired leaders from other districts. So what should we as a committee, what steps should we be taking next?
Sure. So I think in the very short term, the reason why it's important to have someone, and in this case potentially Ms. Masiello, in the this interim position at least for a short time, is because you need someone in the district who's able to sign documents, contracts, the things that you need an administrator to be able to do day to day. And then as far as a long-term or longer-term interim superintendent, I mean, usually these things happen a little more informally than obviously a formal superintendent search. You would, I think the idea is to kind of gauge who's available either within your own school community or who's available amongst retirees. You could do a more formal kind of like posting. In my experience, usually school districts will identify a number of people that school committee members may be interested in, gauge their interest or reach out through legal to kind of gauge their interest, and then discuss, the possibilities of different candidates in open session, and then appoint someone to a more permanent interim position depending on candidates, obviously cert, availability, and willingness to, take the position.
So can we request, this item is on the agenda as discussion and action, and I don't know if there was a motion made or not, but can we request that you, Ms. Lombardo, look out through to see who is available, who might be available, that holds the appropriate certification, that might be a retired superintendent, and then bring that forward, and that would be something we would discuss in executive session, I assume, and then once we come to some kind of agreement, then bring it to open session. Am I correct in that process?
I think it would depend on if we were offering them some kind of a contract, then that could be an executive session under negotiations. I think my suggestion would be just to make sure that I am not too much a part of the process, and am more of like a conduit, that you would have me maybe reach out to the Rhode Island Superintendents Association and ask if they have a list of retired or former superintendents who are available and interested in the position. We can kind of, bring that list back, and you can decide, if you're interested in making an offer to any of those superintendents. I mean, I think that that's probably the way to do it, so that legal doesn't become kind of a, get too inserted in the process, and it remains an objective, kind of process that's determined by the school committee.
So I like that idea, and I was not trying to put the whole job on your shoulders, but
I didn't mean it like that at all. I just want to make sure that nobody thinks I'm selecting the
you are selecting the superintendent. No, I understand that. So if you could start that process and reach out to the Rhode Island Association of School Superintendents, and then help us with what would be our next step. Would we discuss the list of potential candidates in executive session? Is that how that would work?
So I don't know that you would be able to discuss that in executive session unless you are planning on, if you had a contract ready and you are kind of selecting someone, I think that you could as for negotiation purposes. I think what I would do is probably, if there's a motion and a second, and the motion passes for me to reach out to the Rhode Island School Superintendent Association, I would reach out to them, asking for a list to kind of gauge who has the cert and is available. I would probably reach out to those people to see if they had interest in coming to South Kingstown, and then I could come back to all of you, with the list, and by the time we came to a meeting, you could, have kind of checked out all of their credentials, and, we could discuss some kind of contract in executive session, which we would then vote on, and discuss and vote on in open session.
Okay, so I know there may be further discussion at the table, but is it appropriate for me to make a motion to request that you do what you just said, Ms. Lombardo?
Yes, and then, then discussion can happen after a second.
Okay. So I've made the motion.
Second.
Discussion.
So My question would be, because as Kate pointed out, even though this would not be our permanent superintendent, it is a very important position because they're going to be guiding us in choosing the next superintendent. And I know it's, Aubrey, as you said, a less formal process, but I'm just wondering, is there a committee? Is it just us? Would we solicit feedback from the greater community, the teachers? Is that something that typically happens?
So you can do whatever you want to do. In my experience, that is, I mean, some limited feedback, but usually there's not like a separate committee to find an interim superintendent, because the idea really is to get someone in place who can kind of, you know, run things administratively, hopefully with the help and cooperation of the rest of the admin team, while the focus would really be on getting your committees together to finding permanent superintendent, which I imagine you would aim to do prior to the school year if possible. So I think, you know, typically, and again, you can do, you know, whatever process the school committee wants to go through, you're welcome to go through. In a typical process, the focus would be more on getting someone in place who hopefully has some familiarity with the district and the admin team to keep operations running smoothly, while like focusing most of your efforts on finding your permanent superintendent.
Thank you.
Okay.
I guess to echo what Michelle was asking, like it feels a little odd to, like if all of a sudden I came up with a name in the middle of the meeting right now and just been like, we should ask so-and-so, and it's like, how do I know they would even be available, want to, you know, so that's where I think the hesitancy comes to actually right this minute say a name. I have people in mind, but again, it would be like putting someone on the hot seat. But I also agree where it's important to get someone who we can trust to objectively guide our district to finding the right superintendent, not necessarily like having a committee decide on the interim in order to get a committee to decide on, you know, so we want someone with experience and experience with South Kingstown, as well as just a seasoned veteran in going through the process to get us where we need to be as quickly as possible, but as efficiently and getting the right choice instead of getting the quick choice. So I think that's kind of where I hesitate to say a name, only because I would hate to say a name and have them not be available or interested. So, but I do like the idea of kind of going out to the Rhode Island Superintendents Association to see if they have people that they know are available and would be interested first, and then going from there.
That said, I just want to, make it clear that even though this is a process that we need to move on, we're not going to be moving on it in a desperate manner, but in a manner that we're looking for the right person to come into our district and lead us. Okay? And so when we're doing that, we're going to be looking for that individual that is teacher-centered, student-centered, and centered around our buildings, and willing to include our community in the process when we're making big decisions moving forward, especially around school buildings and big projects like that. Really like to have our community engaged, and so we won't be moving in a desperate manner, just to be clear on that. Is there any more discussion on this? So will we be making a vote to put Gina in as the intern for the?
I think you just need to vote on the motion Michelle's motion on the table first, and then I would suggest that you make that motion.
Okay.
Aye.
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 I will make a motion to put Gina Marie Masiello in the interim position until we find a permanent interim superintendent.
Second.
Ms. Boyd?
My only statement on that is hoping that we can continue to have some guidance through legal and through our team, some initial discussions, feedback from others about what that criteria, what that contract would look like, what those responsibilities are. So I know anyone new in a leadership role certainly has large shoes to fill and probably would like that guidance. So I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that going forward on her behalf.
Shall we visit? Ms. Boyd?
Aye.
Ms. McNamee?
Aye.
Ms. Fish?
Aye.
Ms. Busso?
Aye.
Ms. Whitworth? Aye. That motion passes. That vote passes. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:55 p.m.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This
Aye.
meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Sir? So, as they say, out not with a bang, but a whimper. The superintendent has separated from South Kingstown High. An interim superintendent has been appointed. Interestingly enough, if my reading is correct, she is in fact the head of the curriculum, which isn't that where all this madness started out in the first place? If I can quote, and the gentleman standing next to me, I bet, I haven't gotten to chat with him much, but I bet is a student of history. And there was an old, I think it was a 19th century cartoon, one of the first. It was called Pogo. And in a time before there were catchphrases, they came up with one of the first, and it is, I have seen the enemy, and it is us. We've never had a chance really to talk. We've kind of traveled in each other's directions, nodded at each other, kind of stood outside of these crazy meetings, and in fact, come around this side, so you're in front. Let me just bring this back a little. Too damn tall. So, first of all, we never introduced. Give me your name here. Well, I'll hold this right here, so we both of us.
My name's Sean Cody.
All right, and are you involved in any organizations? Are you a parent?
I am a parent. I have 2 children, one in the district, one not within this, well, one that goes to private school within the town.
Right. You've been pretty, I'll call it politely, professionally provocative over the last 2 weeks, which I get a sense that's your jam. You used the word today, get rid of her. And there are those in today's society who would find that as being insensitive. But you also made, at the same time though, your point was on target because you kept getting back to the central point of why this needed to happen. What is the central point? Why did this need to happen?
The central point of why this needed to happen is because there was a data breach that involves student data. And in the end, that's the reason that this is a fireable offense. It had nothing to do with if she was a good superintendent on the educational side. It had to do with that she breached the data of the children.
So, in other words, you were able to step beyond the emotional aspect, the affinities, the personal relationships, and say, well, wait a minute, dude, this is, I think the term is stop, do not pass, go.
Correct. I think that the emotions had to be separated. Sometimes you have to look at things from an ethical manner, and sometimes managers or superintendents in this case make mistakes that create fireable offenses no matter how you feel about them as a person.
Right. And you clearly felt that this was the case.
I felt that this was the time, yes.
You also, and again, politely and professionally, challenge one of the central notions here. The narrative was being built over the last few weeks that somehow this woman, who's obviously very capable at a very high level on a number of issues, somehow, though, at the same time, carried with her pixie dust, where she was able to create a magic that the inference routinely was would never be able to be recreated again.
Correct.
And what is your thought on that?
I guess my thoughts to that, or my challenge to that, is that the superintendent shouldn't dictate the capability of the teachers. The teachers should teach to the students, regardless of the superintendent in place. They report into a principal who's really their guiding light, and then from there it goes up the chain. So this connecting point to the superintendent being kind of the holy grail of the school system, I thought was flawed.
Right, and again, you introduced routinely over the last couple of weeks logic into a logical situation. Why do you think this was dragged out too long? The whole cathartic process. I mean, this to me, this seemed not unlike the sort of really bad junior high school or junior year English novels that we were all forced to suffer through over some obscure point that would be made on a general theme. That this was just nuts.
I do think it was dragged out too long, and I think the reasoning behind that was the amount of time the superintendent was given to come up with a statement that essentially said, I did this, I understood I did it, but I'm going to pretend I don't know where I guess the data landed, which I found interesting because when I looked through her background, prior to being a superintendent, she was a director of technology. So I thought that created also a massive flaw that I never had to go into here, but I was prepared to if needed to. That I was a director of technology prior, that understand where data being released to lands.
Right. Well, if I can, since we're and focusing on turgid prose, not from you, but from me tonight, if I can quote another really bad example of 1980s culture, tomorrow is only a day away. Listen, it's been great to meet you. Don't be a stranger. I think your type of, the type of critical analysis you provide in forums where it's, emotions got mad. I expected at some point them to start handing out emojis at any moment. All right. Is very important in town government. I got to say that. I'm editorializing here, but there's at a certain point, this isn't about, we're not the Care Bears here of education. Simply huddling together, here I go in the 80s again, saying we care, isn't good enough. You're in a situation like this, you're running a sophisticated business. And the challenge is to find ways to educate our children, which is clearly failing across the state, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I would say that that's true.
Well, God bless.
Thank you.
All right.